All right, time once again for another meeting of the Northern New England chapter of SABR. We always hold our meetings in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman chapter of SABR out in Vermont, Dr. Clayton Truder, chair. Now, tonight's meeting, very special meeting. For a reader interested in learning more about working in sports, or the avid fan that wants to have an inside look at what those inside the radio booth go through on a day-to-day basis, John Kocsis' new book, Play-by-Play from the Minors, Profiles of Baseball Broadcasters from Scranton to Yakima, contains the secrets and successes of minor league baseball broadcasters combined with a century of experience in telling the story of America's pastime. A host of decorated industry veterans discuss their careers, sharing tales of heralded baseball greats from before they were famous, players who didn't make it past Class A ball, the trials and triumphs of the zaniest promotional exercises to hit the market, some of small town America's greatest cuisine, the highs of winning a championship, and the lows of being stranded on the side of the highway for hours. I can relate to that. John started his career as a video production intern in Charleston, West Virginia in 2017, prior to picking up the mic for the West Virginia Power in 2018. The avid baseball fan moved to Hagerstown for his first lead broadcaster role with the Suns in 2019 and has been with the Columbia Fireflies since February of 2020. John Kocsis, welcome to Northern New England, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the warm welcome, and thanks for having me this week.
This is terrific. I've been looking forward to this for an awfully long time. Now, do me a favor, give me an idea. How did you get started in this industry?
Yeah, so I grew up in Cleveland in the 90s, and I'm left-handed. So for the longest period of time, I wanted to be Jim Thome. And right around fourth grade or fifth grade, I realized the potential for me to hit 600 home runs in Major League Baseball was just not there. So I had to think of something else to do. And after kind of growing up reading a lot and writing and doing well in a lot of my reading comprehension tests and things like that, I felt that I was a really talented writer. So for the longest, I wanted to be a sports writer. And I went through high school as the editor-in-chief of my paper and did a bunch of freelance writing things in and around Cleveland. And then my senior year, our basketball team was good enough that they had, for a second straight year, made it to the state Final Four in basketball. So I somehow got an opportunity to talk about our team on ESPN Cleveland. I said, wow, this is really cool. I think I'd want to do this. I went to Ohio University for a degree in broadcast journalism, and my freshman year, I got an opportunity to do play-by-play for some hockey. And I said, this is even cooler. How can I do this in a larger role? So my sophomore year of college, I got an internship with a summer wood bat league, the Southern Ohio Copperheads. And at that point, I was hooked. I knew the answer was baseball, and play-by-play in baseball specifically was what I wanted to do. And I'd do whatever it took to get a job that paid me to do that. So I went to winter meetings a couple of times. I went through the internship process, the interview process for a bunch of different things. You know, I've pulled tarp, I've been multiple mascots, I've done it all. And fortunately enough, I'm the voice of a team at this point. So fantastic to be able to kind of go through all those trials and tribulations to get here to Columbia, South Carolina.
You know, it's funny, you've kind of given me some tidbits there that indicate to me that we led a little bit of a parallel existence. You just mentioned that you did some play-by-play for hockey. Now, I know this is the Society for American Baseball Research, but I'm going somewhere with this. Tell me a little bit about that experience, and then I'll give you the punchline.
Yeah, Ohio University holds an ACHA team, and every fourth year they host the CSCHL tournament. So there were something like 13 hockey games over the course of 3 days, and I was normally pregame and intermission reports for it, but they couldn't make our poor play-by-play and color guy for that broadcast team call 13 games in 3 days. So I got the opportunity to do that. And I'll tell you, hockey and baseball couldn't be any more different. To prepare for hockey, you're doing a lot of flashcards with numbers because you got to memorize people's names, and there's no fixed position or anything like that. So you never really know where people are unless you're looking at their sweater, or if you know them just by how they look from familiarity. Whereas baseball, right? If I look towards right field, man, the guy who started the game is probably going to be in right field, right? But once the baseball is moving, it certainly is a lot faster. And I would say that you get a lot more time for storytelling in baseball, but ever since the dawn of the pitch clock, we certainly have to change a little bit more about how we're telling the stories of these players in between pitches.
Well, I'm going to get to that in just a second too. But it's funny we talk about hockey because as a kid, oh my God, I don't want to tell you how long ago this was because it was a while. Ben's laughing at me already watching you.
Well, I'm thinking maybe I'm the only Canadian person here. So like hockey and baseball are equally on the level for me.
There you go.
In terms of my two favorite sports.
I did.
And they were very different.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. You cut out. I thought you were done. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I was going to say the fact that I live in Vancouver, Canada, we have an NHL team. It's really our only major league team of the Big Four. And the fact that I like hockey and baseball equally as much, I can see how the experience of calling two different games would be so different, having often sometimes watched them on two different televisions at the same time.
I'm with Ben. I agree.
Right? Like equally great games, but totally different.
So a million years ago, like I was saying, John, you and I had a little parallel existence. I used to be a substitute play-by-play guy for the old Springfield Indians in the American Hockey League.
Oh, wow.
And that was the most difficult thing I'd ever done in minor league sports. I don't know how you did it. I don't know how the guys on TV do it today, but wow, that was tough. But you've also talked about a lot of the things you did in minor league baseball before you got behind the mic.
Mm-hmm.
So
during.
And yeah, there you go. Give me an idea. Give me a little idea of your experience, because I've got a lot of experience in minor league baseball myself. So I'm interested to compare my old days to yours.
Yeah, I mean, being in Hagerstown, I think our front office had 7 people in it. So everyone did everything, right? During games, I was running the social media. I was making graphics after the game for big things that happened. Before a school day, you'd roll hot dogs because you had to, if you had 1,000 kids coming, you had to prepare those hot dogs somehow, and food and beverage wasn't coming in at 3:00 in the morning to make enough hot dogs for all those kids by noon, right? I can't tell you how many. I know I've been 4 different mascots while I've been in minor league baseball, but I can't tell you how many times I've put on a suit. The longest I've been in a suit, though, was for a Little League's opening day. I was a mascot for 3 Little League baseball games and just went in between fields with them. So it certainly teaches you to not just respect what difficulty those people go through when they're a mascot during your games, but it teaches you kind of the unwritten rules where if it's a really hot day and you see the mascot, try and find a spot where they can duck inside and take that helmet off for a little bit or something, so that way they're not sweating like crazy. What else have I done while I've been in minor league baseball? I currently sell corporate sales. I've done the video production stuff for a team before, so I've set up the video board. I've put up all the statistics, graphics, and coding underneath that. I run our website, or at least part of our website, for the Fireflies. So if there's anything that involves computers, I mean, even our head security guy the other day got a new monitor, and he called me down to his office and he said, "Hey, can you make it so all 3 of my monitors can be displayed from my computer?" So I guess you can call me an IT guy too. But if it beeps or runs a computer, typically I'm one of the first people asked to help fix things if something's wrong with it.
And that's the beauty of minor league baseball, because everybody's got their hand in everything. It's a real joint effort amongst everybody in the front office. When I was working years ago for the Britain Rock Cats, who were at the time the AA affiliate of the Minnesota Twins, lineage of the team now goes, they're now the Hartford Guard Goats under Colorado. I played all the mascots. I did a lot of the stuff that you just described. And I think you and I can both agree that those outfits on a July day, there it is. Yeah, he's shaking his head in front of 6,000 people. You can actually feel the weight just drop off you in those suits, especially if it's a double header.
Yeah. And normally, a beer or two afterwards helps make you feel a little bit better, but I feel like it takes a full day to get rehydrated normally.
Oh, at least, at least. And now you're doing play-by-play for the Columbia Fireflies. Tell us a
Yes,
little bit about the team and who they're under, things like that. Give me a little idea of the team.
Yeah, the Fireflies are the Class A affiliate of the Kansas City Royals, and actually we're just wrapping up the first half right now. We've got 9 games remaining in the first half of the season, and the Fireflies are only 2 games out of a playoff spot, so they'll need some help to catch Myrtle Beach, but certainly an opportunity to clinch the first playoff spot in team history today. Columbia moved from Savannah back in 2016. They were the Sand Gnats, affiliated with the Mets, moved over to Columbia, South Carolina to get out of historic Grayson Stadium and have a full new development. It's called the Bull Street District down here. It's the largest urban revitalization project on the East Coast. So it's a really big thing here in Columbia that got to kick off right before the pandemic. And when I moved here in 2020 was when it really started to sprout and get its wings. There have been 3 apartment complexes built in the district since I've gotten there in 2020. We've got a couple new parking decks, condos, townhouses, and now all the retail is starting to come in. So it's going to be really magical to kind of see what everything looks like in 2025, just a couple of years after I moved in here. And I first moved in and there was a Starbucks and that was it. It was just kind of a blank canvas, a ballpark, and a Starbucks. So it's certainly been really cool to watch the district grow up around me.
Yeah, let me guess, you couldn't bring your Starbucks into the ballpark if you bought it before the game, right?
Well, since I get there at 9 a.m., normally people aren't too they aren't too worried about what I'm bringing in. I normally actually have coffee as the first thing, and then I pack tea for later. So I'll do coffee in the morning, a cup of tea, and then I switch to water by the time it's broadcast time.
There you go. So you have written this book, which I am very, very interested to get into here. Now, title of the book is Play-by-Play from the Minors, Profiles of Baseball Broadcasters from Scranton to Yakima. Now, it's due out in October, if I recall correctly. Is that October 23rd that I read? Is that correct?
I don't have a final date for it yet. So initially it was going to come out today, but there were some editing delays and some other things that happened. So we're still waiting for a final timeline. I think what ended up happening was with this writer strike, the company that I'm working with, McFarland Books, also has some movies that they're working on from book screenplay type things. So I think that the editor that I'm working with got kind of roped into that and had to take some time off. But we're kind of working through editing things right now, and hopefully we'll have another date that we'll stick to this time. And hopefully it's the fall. I remember when I spoke with them, when I first signed the contract, the goal was to get it out before this World Series. So October, November would certainly be great.
I remember when we scheduled this, we scheduled it for today because we initially thought the book was coming out today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, and I noticed as I was preparing for this evening that it had been pushed out to October. That's why I grabbed that date and I went at it from there. But I know the writer strike has caused a lot of disruption throughout TV, radio, movies, plays. I didn't realize that it was actually affecting someone like you who is just trying to get his book out there.
Yeah, everything's interconnected. And the more I've learned about this process, I mean, to give you an idea of how it started, I'm used to in summer working 70 to 100 hours every single week with baseball, as I'm sure you remember from your time in minor league baseball. Oh, yeah. And I moved to Columbia, brand new place, in February of 2020. And I think we all remember what happened in March of 2020. So sometime around June of 2020, I was pretty bored. I initially set out and said, hey, let's explore every park within 100 miles of Columbia, because I'm an avid camper. I like, taking hikes or running or biking. And so I explored every park, ran out of parks by midsummer. And so then I kind of thought, what else could I do? And I remember sometime in college, I thought, hey, it would be really cool to write a book. And I thought, when's another time I'm going to have this much time? And so I wrote it during the pandemic. I edited it in 2021, and then I tried to sell it in fall of 2021. to a publisher. Once I found McFarland and I gave it to him, I said, "Oh man, well, I'm done here, right? This is all the work I'll have to do." And I did not realize how crazy the editing process is. So plenty more work to be done, but I'm happy to do it. I mean, I think there are a lot of really good stories to tell within.
Well, tell me about the genesis of the book, where you got the idea to start this, and how it evolved over time, where you got your stories. How did you construct this book?
Yeah, so at first I wanted to just see if it was possible. So I did a chapter on myself, and basically the questions that I came up with and the different things I asked all the different broadcasters I profiled were, once the baseball game's over, you're normally a little hungry, so you go to a bar because that's all that's open after the ball game's over, and you try and grab a bite to eat. And I feel like in all these small towns in America, we were just in Kinston, we're about to be in Fayetteville, so think towns like that. You go up to a bar and there's always someone that sits next to you, and you're waiting for food to come out, and there's the natural conversation you'll have. Oh, what's your name? You're watching whatever game. Oh, who do you want to win? And then eventually someone's going to say something to the effect of, well, what do you do for a living? And typically when you say you're the play-by-play voice of a baseball team or you're a radio broadcaster, then they perk up a little bit and they're like, oh, what's that like? And basically, because I've had that same exact conversation with so many random different people at bars, I figured, hey, all these questions that I normally get asked on the bar stool, maybe these are questions that people want to know about all their favorite broadcasters throughout minor league baseball. So it always starts off with, oh, where are you from? What got you into this type of thing? Kind of like what you asked me here. And then there are people who will ask you, oh, well, who's the best player you've ever seen? Or what's the wildest thing that you've heard someone do or seen someone do on a field? Or, oh, you have any really good clubhouse guys? Any guys that are real like jokesters in the locker room? And there are some people who maybe aren't super into baseball, but they'll say, oh, the Woodpeckers had this promotional night the other year, a month or so ago. What type of promotions have you seen? They're just kind of crazy. So I kind of morphed all those things together and asked them to a lot of different prominent broadcasters in minor league baseball, some who have been in there for a really long time, some who have just been in there for a couple of years, and compiled all these different fantastic stories, did some more research to figure out a little bit more about them, and then came out with a book.
I don't want to give away too much that's in the book, but can you tell me how many broadcasters did you interview for this? Did you interview nationally, regionally?
Yeah, so it's national. I believe it's 13 broadcasters, 2 major league guys, and Rob Ford and Joe Block, a couple AAA guys like Josh Wetzel, Adam Marco, Josh Suchan over in Albuquerque. You guys are close to Portland, so Emma Tiedemann's featured in the book.
Oh, nice.
Is Alex Cohen, the Iowa Cubs. Someone said they were from Seattle. Rob Ford was out west in Yakima when he started. I think it was Suchan who said that he liked Tacoma as well. So I know not on top of Seattle, but like kind of close to that area. But I feel like I tried my best not to get a bunch of people from the same league. I've got people who talked about their time in the California League and people who International League, Pacific Coast League. I tried to get as much of minor league baseball as I could.
So you are in Single A in Columbia with the Fireflies, and we've now written this book. So we've got our name out there a little bit, John. Do you see yourself wanting to move through, the ladder of minor league baseball? Are you one who is, eyeing that ballpark on the hill in AAA or the major leagues? Are you content where you are? How do you see it progressing from here after working with the Fireflies for three and a half years now, and then moving into an authorship?
Yeah, well, honestly, I love my time that I've had in Columbia. I think it's a fantastic organization. But I think most broadcasters, want to do the same thing the players want to do. The difference is just a player's career is 6-7 years long, and a broadcaster's career is 50 years long. So yeah, one day I would love to call Major League Baseball or I'd like to take another step up that rung if I can. A lot of it is who you know, what you know, and being in the right place at the right time, having that type of availability. But certainly I'd like to climb ladders to a higher market and then to some better baseball in AA or AAA at the very least. But when I first moved to Columbia, I had a very candid conversation when they were interviewing me. And I think they know, because broadcasters and groundskeepers tend to be the people who do want to climb, as opposed to, if you're a salesperson, wherever you're a salesperson, you're selling tickets, and the tickets are probably priced around the same. So if you've got a spot where you can build your family and stuff like that, you're going to be happy there. But I told them, 5 to 7 years was the goal in Columbia. And then after that, kind of try and look beyond. But it's got to be the right offer and the right type of place. Columbia draws very well. We average about 3,800 a night. And then, we've got a really great ownership group in Hardball Capital. They also own the Tin Caps and the Chattanooga Lookouts. So certainly have to have some type of stability and the right type of benefits package and things like that on top of the baseball thing. So there's a lot to weigh.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about how your 5 to 7 years was your goal to be in Columbia. A friend of mine who is the play-by-play guy in Hartford, Jeff Dooley, has been with, you might have heard of him. He's been with Hartford and Britain now since I was with them back in the 90s. He just called his first 2 games for the Rockies this year when the club was in Philadelphia earlier in late May or early June. I can't quite remember the date off the top of my head. I'm getting to be a guy of a certain age, and those dates kind of, they kind of go away well. But Jeff has been with the club for an awfully long time as a Hartford institution. And it's funny how you see some of those guys like you who are interested in moving up through the ladder. And then you have, and in my opinion, and Jeff will probably see this on YouTube and send me an email, I find it unusual that guys like him stay for as long as they do. But man, I'll tell you, the stories, I mean, you've got plenty of them in this book. I can relate to stories from before before social media got big, and we were on these little radio stations in Connecticut where they had to shut the transmitter off at like 9:30 at night, or there was going to be interference or whatever, and Jeff would have to leave, go to the radio station and shut the transmitter down for the night. So those were the days.
That's nuts. Well, and there's one story I can think of specifically where in this book that probably wouldn't have been able to happen today. It was a Joe Block story when he was talking about promotional nights and when he was talking about some of the crazier things he's seen. Of course, the ownership group of the Charleston River Dogs, that's the Gold Claim group. So they're known for being real fun, having some pretty wonky promotions, right? That goes all the way back to the disco demolition night for the Chicago White Sox. But back sometime in the late 90s, the Charleston River Dogs decided to have a Tanya Harding autograph night. But they had advertised it to everyone else as mini bat giveaway night. So the first 1,000 people through the gates got a mini bat. And this was, again, late 90s. So maybe a year, 2 years after Tanya had that issue where she got banned from the Olympics that year. And then fans would come through the gates with a mini bat, and here's Tanya Harding ready to sign autographs, not knowing that all of them were going to get mini bats. But if it were today's day and age, her publicist, her agent, or her, she would have just gone online. She would have gone to charlestonriverdogs.com. She would have kind of scrolled through and been like, oh wait, something's up. I don't want to come here on mini bat night. That'd be a bad thing. And it's not that I didn't believe Joe Block when he told me that story, but I said there's got to be some type of remnants from this, because he had told me that she stayed there for like a half hour before she had enough and she just left. And I went on eBay, and sure enough, there was a Tanya Harding signed mini bat with the Charleston River Dogs logo on it for like $87. So
What?
Crazy enough that we're talking 25, 30 years down the road, it still exists.
So was that intentional? Do you know?
Oh, for sure. Knowing the Gold Claim group, it was intentional, but the intention was for her not to find out, so she would show up. So they advertised it publicly to their fans as mini bat giveaway night. They advertised it to her as, hey, you're just going to do a autograph signing. We'd love to have you. You're an Olympian, you're a gold medalist, whatever. And then two things collided, and the 5,000 people in attendance that day just got a bonus.
Oh my God, that's right, Kara. That's absolutely hilarious. Oh my God.
Well, and that was back when remote radio shows were how everyone found out everything, right? Today you go to Twitter, you go to a website, you go to some form of social media, but back then, you've got WCOL sitting there locally, and they're talking on air, and everyone's tuned in on their drive home from work, and they're like, hey, we got Tanya Harding, we've got mini back giveaway, she's going to be signing autographs. I'm sure that the day of walk certainly grew because of the climate that was around that, but they did their best to make sure Tanya didn't find out about it until people walked through with the mini bags.
Oh my God. Wow. That's nuts. It's, you've got plenty of stories in this book, and like I said, I'm not giving away anything in the book, but what I want to shift gears toward is there's gotta be a bunch of stories that didn't make it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Give me what didn't make it. Give me one or two maybe that didn't make it, something that you found fun, but you couldn't quite keep in the book.
Well, actually, I've got a great example. So when I was editing, I had realized I didn't have any Columbia Fireflies stuff in it because I had not yet broadcast a game by the time I finished the book for the Columbia Fireflies. I'd only been in Hagerstown in West Virginia. And then by the time I finished editing, I had my first season in Columbia. So I was kind of thinking, what different things could I put in there that were Columbia Fireflies related, so that way it's at least a more updated version of who I am. And one of them was Daryl Collins has a walk-off grand slam on our 4th of July Independence Day game back in 2021. It was kind of the first big day back from the pandemic. And that replaced something that popped up on my Facebook memories today, which was a Kyle Marincon's walk-off 3-run home run that helped the Hagerstown Suns sweep a doubleheader, had them go on like a 6-game winning streak. And then it eventually led to a playoff run. The team did not make the playoffs, but they were dead in the water. And then because that doubleheader sweep and the 6-game winning streak, all of a sudden it was like, hey, something's possible. So the Kyle Marincon story kind of went out of the water, even though great story. He did an incredible thing. It was one of at least my favorite calls from my time before I came here to Columbia. And then it ended up not making the book.
Okay. A lot of SABR members out there are watching this on YouTube after the fact, and many of our friends here know that I am motivated by, how to put this gently, food.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, my wife's shaking her head. Yes, if you can't see her on camera, she's like, I asked her. So what are some of the more interesting, and again, I don't have to give away everything in the book, of course. We want people to go out and buy the book after they see this. Mm-hmm. What are some of the more interesting culinary delights that you have experienced?
All right, so I'll actually tell you one from 2 weeks ago, or not 2 weeks ago, but within the last month. I went to Salem, Virginia for the first time to see the Red Sox, and everywhere in town, I just kept seeing these signs for this place called Mac and Bob's. And I asked 6 or 7 people once I got there. The first thing I typically do is I ask the broadcasters, hey, what would you eat? If you had only one more night in Salem, what's the one place you would go out and eat or something? And then I'll ask, random fans before the game when the gates are open. I'll say, hey, I'm here in visiting team gear, but I'm with the team. I'm going to be here for a week. What would you eat? Just trying to get a kind of taste of what the area thinks is good. And no one said Mac and Bob's. And that just normally when you see signage, a lot of people just talk about the signage, and that made me even further intrigued. So I go to this place, and it's first off, the greatest bar scene area that's within Salem on their main street. They had just renovated it, and it had 2 parking lots because the one parking lot when they originally built it was no longer enough. So they expanded because of so much demand. And I came in and I don't know, it must have been 2 o'clock in the afternoon for a sports bar, not a good spot or not a good time for it, but they had, 10, 11, 12 tables still, right? And I talked to the waitress and she said, I know you're thinking bar food, you're thinking a burger, you're thinking corn dogs. She said, trust me, get the calzone. She said, don't go meat lovers, don't go pepperoni, don't go regular pizza. She's like, we call it the Boston zone. And it was buffalo chicken calzone. And man, first off, the plate was huge. I split it in half and I had some of it after the game that night. So it was 2 meals in one, but also it's one of the better calzones I've ever had. So Mac and Bob's was a really great spot. And I guess one that someone else told me, I grew up in Cleveland. I come home every year for Christmas and for some other things. And I talked to Rob Ford and he said, I'm a New York guy. I'm really picky about delis. But when I was in Binghamton, New York, I went to Akron and I tried this place called the Diamond Deli. It looked like nothing. It was a hole in the wall. Didn't have high expectations, but I was really feeling a Reuben that day. So I got the corned beef sandwich. And he said it was absolutely fantastic. And so I said, you know what? I'm from 35 minutes away from Akron. I've never heard of this place. So I talked to my dad and I said, hey, let's give it a try, right? And so I gave it a try with my dad and I said, wow, how have I been sleeping on this random deli that's within a half hour of me? So it's already impacted my life by just talking with these different broadcasters.
That's true. Like I say, many people who know me throughout SABR are going to know that I am motivated by food and hearing about these little small places throughout the country and whatnot. I love it because as you're going around different ballparks, not just the ballpark food that you want to try, you want to get into the local area and their stuff, for lack of a better term.
Also, Alec, funny enough, named Diamond Deli right across the street from Canal Park, but not named it because of the proximity to the ballpark. It used to be a jewelry store and the jewelry store closed and they opened up the deli. So just a happy coincidence, Alec. I like the comment though, because I thought the same exact thing and then talked to the owner and the owner had said it was because it was a jewelry store.
No kidding. Oh, that's very interesting. Let's open this up to the crowd that we have this evening for questions and comments and things like that. Before we do that, I want to welcome Richard Gullison. If I'm saying that correctly, Richard is our newest SABR member here tonight. I had a chance to talk to him just before we started our Zoom to invite him in. Richard was a SABR member back years ago and has rejoined us, and we are thrilled to death to have him. Richard, how are you?
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you great, man. It's really great to have you. I just want to welcome you properly to SABR and thank you for joining, and we're glad you made it here tonight, my friend.
Yeah, it was a little journey. I didn't have the Zoom on the computer. I had to, find my way around it and then get there. So
that's okay. That's okay. He's here. We're glad you're here. Do you have anything for John, by the way?
No, other than what we have, the Manchester
the chicken tenders is what they're called when they're things.
It's the Toronto minor league team. And they've been here for a few years. I go to a few games once in a while.
Which Toronto minor league team is it?
Toronto.
Oh, okay. So you're watching the Blue Jays play? You said a Toronto minor league team, or are you?
Yeah, we are the Fisher Cats here.
The Fisher Cats, yeah, that's it.
Okay. Oh, yeah, right.
Affiliate of the Blue Jays, yeah.
Yeah.
I know the whole Toronto minor league structure because I was writing for a site. I won't take 2 minutes of conversation called battersbox.ca where we cover all the different Toronto minor league sports. And so I covered for someone last week, and so I learned about Dunedin. I knew about New Hampshire. And I knew about Buffalo, but I hadn't heard about the Dunedin team. And I live in Vancouver, Canada. We have the high A team.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
What do we have for John tonight? Questions, comments, things like that. Kate, was that a hand up, Kate?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there you go.
Hi, I'm from Dover, New Hampshire for everybody. To John, And I think what you're doing is great. I wish I could broadcast, but my parents were teachers, and I have a question regarding, I've listened to a lot of broadcasters from Vin Scully. I've lived across the country. I grow concerned because it may be a minor point, but some of the use of the English language by native speakers, I'm not talking foreign born, where good versus well, between versus among, just basic grammar, I hear being slaughtered. And I'm not pinning it on sports people. I hear it on the national news, local news. I heard it a lot in sports by broadcasters who are college educated. I'm not asking for Elizabethan English, but my dad, till the day he died, who was self-made from Cleveland, from Westlake, Ohio, who ended up going to college after anyway, he corrected the three of us kids until the day he died about grammar and and all of it in a loving way. So I don't know, I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but I just hear it across the board. And it's just, I just wish some of the guys and the gals would just take a few minutes to just review a few basic things, because to me, it's jarring.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I do with interns and stuff like that is I typically tell them they got to write well before they speak well, because most of the times when you're speaking and you have no time to process what you're saying, right? I'm relaying a baseball going 100 miles an hour off the wall in right field, and I just kind of have to say whatever I'm thinking at the moment. But practicing your writing always helps most with that. And maybe that's from the bias of having a writing background and starting off wanting to be a sports writer before wanting to be a sports broadcaster. But I truthfully believe that working on your writing is the greatest way to make what you say sound better. And it's funny enough, this weekend I had a conversation with our social team about the difference between affect versus effect, verb versus noun, and stuff like that. And it's something that, yeah, I mean, everyone's learning every day. You know, I learned, I mean, we all have those special words that we can't spell no matter what you do, right? I before E, except after C, and weird, because that's just a weird word, right? We all think of different aneurysms or different things that we can try and do to help ourselves through different words that we're spelling and things of that nature. But especially in today's day and age where everything's digital and everything, you know, back when you had newspaper and stuff, that was the only way that people did things. You read through things 20 times, because if you made a mistake, that was a big deal and it stuck for a day. Now I can press edit, right? So I think a lot of our carefulness has gone away. And I try, at least with the interns that I have hand-to-hand experience with, I try and empathize that, hey, like, I understand this is what you grew up with, but some people are not as understanding, and also it takes 2 seconds to reread something and make sure it's spelled right, or that there's a comma where it needs to be.
You know, it's funny you say that, because I am in real life now, I am actually in front-facing retail.
Okay.
And I started out in big box retail in a giant store in New York City that ran a parade every Thanksgiving. Anyway, the woman who mentored me and started me out on this journey a million years ago, good Lord, I don't want to talk about how long ago that was, but anyway, the one thing she said to me on a daily basis was, make sure your command is good. You must speak well to be thought of as well. So I find what you're saying there to be very, very appropriate, John. And Kate's right. I hear a lot of very stumbly, so to speak, broadcasters these days, until they, you know, you get some guys who have a few years in, and all of a sudden that light turns on. It's very interesting to see the metamorphosis of a lot of broadcasters to say, so you're spot on with that comment. That's for sure. But I want to go to our man in Vancouver, Ben Abel. You're up.
Thanks, Bruce. I was going to say a couple comments here. One, John, if you've ever read a book I just dropped in the chat, it is called Moon's Baseball Road Trips. And there's a ton of info in there about food and major league ballparks. It focuses on major league ballparks. And obviously, I found it in our local library. But what it does is it takes you through if you're going to go to a certain area of the US and travel to all the major league ballparks in a certain area. And the other thing I was going to share was a guy you may know. His name's Tyler Zickel. He is the Vancouver Canadians, where I live, equivalent of what you do. I don't know Tyler, but he works for the Blue Jays high A team in Vancouver. He's a broadcaster on our local radio station, Sportsnet 650, and he's also the media relations guy for the Steves. I'm just trying to pull up his bio here. I could send it to you as a private message.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I don't know him personally, but no such thing as too many people to know in baseball. And actually, the Vancouver Canadians did make the book. Rob Ford talked a little bit about some fun after a noon game, the old Wednesday nooners in Vancouver. So
yeah, there's a lot of nooners now. I was there a week ago at a weekend Sunday 105 game where they partner with A&W Root Beer as like a family fun game.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'll let someone else ask a question, but I'll send you that link.
Thank you, Ben.
Anytime.
Let's go to Francis. Francis, how you doing, my friend?
Just fine.
There you go.
Down here in North Carolina. I had a question, and sometimes I'm on these calls and I wonder whether I'm the only one that doesn't understand something. But John, I wanted to ask you about the reference to the writer's strike. Bruce also referred to that and the effect it had on writing your book. First of all, I'll tell you what I thought. I thought the writer's strike was affecting more the writers who wrote for TV shows, movies, etc. How did it affect adversely your project?
Yeah, so the writers' strike didn't have a direct effect on what I'm doing, but the editor that I use also works on editing cinema and stuff. So they couldn't work because they're also working on movie projects. Even though I'm not in movie projects, they just can't work at all. So
the editor.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I thought the strike was affecting the writers more than the editors. I didn't know. I was thinking, well, why couldn't the editor devote more time to your project? But yes. Okay, well, that clarifies that. I didn't know that. And that's the editor for McFarland? Is that right?
One of them. They have 4 or 5 that I use, but the one specifically that I needed at that moment of time was taking some time off.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you.
Go to William Highland. Will, how you doing, guy?
I'm doing well, Bruce. Thanks for asking. I coach baseball, so it was quite a busy spring for me, but I'm glad to be back on the meetings here. And related to Ben's comment, just quickly about the Vancouver Canadians, it's interesting because my dad is from that part of the world, and when he mentioned A&W Root Beer, it's basically like to us, it's what you get at Walmart in the 12-pack, but to Canadians upstairs, up north, it's like it's like McDonald's or Wendy's, but a lot, I would say a lot cleaner, and I'll just leave it there. But I also liked Catherine's point about English language usage, which sort of led me to my question for you. So I do podcasting, and I did some broadcasting and stuff in college. And one of the things that I realized, and I'm wondering if this is true for you, is when you have a co-host or a co-broadcaster, in your case, it would be probably a color commentator. Do you find that the flow of the game goes better? Or I know some minor league teams, they do some alternating between maybe 3 innings of one broadcaster, 3 innings of another, some flow. Some people are totally on their own. Mike Antonellis, who's up here in Portland for a while now, he's in Worcester. I knew him personally, and it seemed like sometimes he was by himself, sometimes he had a partner. What's it like for you? And do you find that the flow of the game and maybe your command of the language goes better with somebody or by yourself?
Yeah, so I actually have not had an intern or a co-host since I've been in Columbia. In 2020, I was supposed to have one, but the pandemic, I mean, just think of what it did to our industry. It wiped away 1 year of revenue. And then the next year, we were at 50% capacity the entire year. So the first 2 years that I worked in Columbia, and I'm in my third baseball season now, but I mean, our revenue is not what we're used to. So one of the easier ways for them to cut on it was saying, hey, let's not have two broadcasters. Let's not, if you think you can handle this, let's just have you there. What I'll say is I'm a huge fan of, if you're going to have an intern and you're going to make them do all these press releases and they're going to help you with media information, I give them 3 primary innings. So I give them innings 4 through 6. And then any game that goes to extra innings, I'll call the evens and they'll call the odds. That way we have a 50% chance of calling the walk-offs and all those things, because again, they're doing a lot of work, right? So I want to reward them for their hard work on the media relations side, for their hard work on certain writing side, feature side, just all the other stuff that they're doing for the club. But I think there's a nuance to it, right? A broadcast in general is something that should sound conversational. And that was, at least to me, the biggest difference between being a guy who broadcasts stuff in college and a guy who broadcasts stuff professionally, is that in college, a lot of people say, put on your broadcaster voice. And professionally, we're saying, hey, this has to be your best voice. And I struggle with that a little bit because in college, I went to script school of journalism, and they very much taught it as though it's you're anchoring the nightly news type thing. And there you're reading a teleprompter and you're kind of like moving your voice around and if you did that for 3 straight hours on a baseball game, people unanimously would turn you off. So Adam Marco, who's now in Scranton Wilkes-Barre, who was with me in West Virginia at one point, he just said, man, you speak well when we're sitting out at the Bud Bar and we're drinking after a game, or you speak well when we're talking in the office about the Guardians the night before or the Pirates or whatever. What's happening when we get in the broadcast that's making it not sound conversational? And one day he just brought a beer into the booth and he's like, all right, we're drinking a beer together. Call the game like you're drinking a beer with me. And that was the thing that clicked for me. That's what kind of taught me, hey, you got to be conversational. So I think that conversationalism is helped a little bit when you have a second person in the booth, but the chemistry's got to come first, right? The difficulty with a 2-person booth, especially in the pitch clock era, is having a back and forth where the color commentator isn't stepping on the pitch. But the difficulty for you talking to yourself for 3 hours is making it sound like you're having a conversation when you're truthfully just talking to yourself for 3 hours.
Yeah, I've listened, as most of us have, to hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of baseball on the radio, and all of you guys do, I think, a tremendous job. And Mike and Emma are locally here are great to listen to, as well as the people that they've had. But I'm sure that if it's a double header, you've not only talked yourself through one game, then you're talking yourself through another game. I feel that way. I would much rather do a podcast or do any sort of broadcast with somebody else, just because that's, I think, what brings out the best in it. But yes, thank you for that long and thoughtful response.
Yeah, 100%.
That was something I want to get into in just a minute, talking about the pitch clock and how that's changed your experience in broadcasting. But I want to go to Alex Stays, who had a great question that he put in the chat that I asked him to come on camera and help us out here. Alec, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. One food comment quickly was that the Vancouver Canadians are playing here in Everett, and they served a poutine dog in honor of that team, which looked terrifying. So if that crosses your path, John, I would advise pass.
Stay away from the poutine dog.
Heart attack and roll.
It was, yeah. So the question I had was, like, among the what we would call famous people, like major league types, or just someone of prominence in the industry, just curious about anyone that's gave you advice or that you got to meet, or any stories about anyone that kind of at the upper echelons of the broadcasting profession, where you will undoubtedly land eventually.
Thank you very much. I mean, Adam Marco's the voice of the AAA club for the Yankees, and I consider him my mentor. We talk, multiple times a month, even if it's just a quick text message or something. We try and actually talk on the phone, a couple of times a year at least. And whenever there were winter meetings or a reason to gather, we were typically meeting up at that point. Rob Ford was super helpful through this process. Joe Block helped me out a ton. In fact, Joe Block gave me the contact information for Josh Suchan. So it was funny. I interviewed Jesse Goldberg Strassler first. Strassler referred me to Joe Block, and then Joe Block said, "Hey, I'm going to keep this chain alive. You should talk to this Josh Suchan guy." So it's kind of, I don't know, in baseball, everyone's just a part of the community. So Jake Eisenberg and I went to the same first winter meetings back in 2016 in that would have been in Nashville. And we both applied for the Brooklyn Cyclones job. He got it, I didn't. But then we were both interns at the same time for a while. And then we were both with the Royals for a while. I was in Columbia last year and he was in Omaha last year. Well, now he's, moved straight from Omaha to Kansas City. So he's the Royals broadcaster. And, last year he did some fill-in stuff for the Mets. So, I keep in contact with Jake. We were actually just talking, every Royals broadcaster in the minors, as well as Jake Eisenberg, are in a group chat together. And anytime something ridiculous happens, we're typically messaging each other. So Luca Tresh, who's a AA catcher for the Royals, he hit an inside the park home run. And I can't remember where Northwest Arkansas was, but the MILB TV feed actually had a little kid's birthday party in there. And so it was an 8-year-old baseball team was in the booth, and the birthday boy was on the mic talking to the broadcaster during an inside the park home run, which is one of the most exciting things to call, but this kid's on there and he's just freezing and doesn't know what to do. So he shared that in there and he's like, I promise my call was at least half as good as this kid's call or something. And, we all kind of went back and forth, but it's funny because, that's minor league baseball quintessentially, right? You want to make this kid's birthday as special as it can be, and they can't do that at a major league ballpark, but you can certainly talk to him for an inning at a minor league park.
John, I want to ask you, I forgot to ask you earlier, and you brought it up there, jogged my memory. Talk to me about the difference in broadcasting a game now with the new rules, especially the pitch clock and things like that. How has that changed your approach during the game?
Yeah, sometimes it feels like a sprint. I used to have a story planned out for every inning from the 3rd inning through the 7th inning. The first 2 innings, you're introducing everyone. The last 2 innings, you don't want to be telling a story if there's some intense amount of action. You've always got a bunch of stories on the back burner or whatever, but there are always intentional stories that you told each inning. Now, because you have a 9-pitch inning and the longest that 9-pitch inning is going to take is 3 minutes. So you can't necessarily tell these long, in-depth stories about guys anymore. In fact, for our club, this last week, 4 of the 6 games we played were under 2 hours, which to me was maddening. So sometimes it feels like you're sprinting rather than a marathon. Baseball is a sprint now. But it's taught me a lot, right? I think one thing that tends to happen if you're a storyteller first is that you tend to get a little bit wordy with your stories. So this helps condense that a little bit. And it teaches you, hey, how can I tell the best stories in the least amount of words? So I think that just kind of helps to adapt. And just like a player, I like the poutine dog that you just shared.
That looks awful.
Yeah. Just like a player, right? If someone starts throwing curveballs and you're not hitting curveballs, you're going to have to adapt, or you're going to have to, find a new job that isn't swinging a baseball bat anymore. So, we're all adapting through that. As far as the stolen bases, like the bases being bigger and you can't throw back more than twice, that really hasn't changed too much. There certainly are more steals now than there were, but that's just an exciting play that now, instead of happening twice a game, happens 3 times a game.
That's good stuff. What else do we have for John tonight? All right,
Is it ever difficult for you in the broadcast booth when you mentioned the type of pitch? Is it difficult for you to pick up what the pitch was. A lot of times, very authoritatively, an announcer will say that was a such and such. And I always wonder how they can pick that up, from a view in the press box.
Yeah. So what's funny about A-ball is press boxes are at every different angle on the planet. If you're in Fredericksburg, you're all the way up the third baseline. You're like literally at third base, but upstairs. So I can't tell if something's inside or outside, right? When I was in Kinston, North Carolina, down east, you were like level with the top of the catcher's head. So you saw things like a batter that was just, 50 feet behind the batter. In Columbia, I'm kind of perched up high. So sometimes like if a ball is low or something, I can't see that quite as well. But I think, especially with your guys, David Sandlin, I'll use as an example because Sandlin was just named the Carolina League Pitcher of the Week today. But when he's throwing his splitter, that's a lot different than his upper 90s fastball. And then he's got a changeup, but he only throws that, I think he throws it 10% of the time right now. So realistically speaking, it's probably not the changeup. Like if you're in doubt, hey, he uses the splitter more frequently, call it the splitter. And then, if I ever can't tell, like the fastball, always you can tell what a fastball is just because it's 20 miles an hour different normally at this level. But with the breaking balls or something, I'll say off speed pitch, breaking ball, he slowed it down, or, you can use that type of thing as well to kind of cheat. But with your guys, you tend to know what pitches they are by their fourth or fifth starts, just with the other team where you have to get inventive, especially because like anymore, like people, instead of having a slider, they're calling it a sweeper. It's the same pitch, it's the same grip, but they call it something funky or something different. So, my rule of thumb, if it's breaking horizontally, I call it a slider. If it's breaking vertically, I call it a curveball. And if someone tells me otherwise, then I'll say, oh, okay, this kid calls it a sweeper, so I'll make that note. Next time he pitches, I'll call it a sweeper. But
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, the book is called Play by Play from the Minors, Profiles of Baseball Broadcasters from Scranton to Yakima. And it's due to come out sometime later in the year, right, John?
Sometime. Hopefully I'll have that date soon.
He's going to have that out in his social media. We know that. John, tell us how we can keep in touch with you out there.
Yeah, it's Twitter's the thing I'm most active on, and I'm Kocsis8. So it's JKOCSIS and then the number 8. And I'm actually on that on all social channels, but Twitter's the one where you guys would want to follow me on. If you follow me on like Instagram or Facebook or something, you're gonna see me post once a year. So Twitter
John's
is
a good follow. John's a good follow. So, all right, next week, Dale Tafoya is going to be here, and he's going to be discussing his new book, One Season in Rocket City: How the 1985 Huntsville Stars Brought Minor League Baseball Fever to Alabama. That should be another great little chat, and I hope everybody's going to join us. Same bat time, same bat channel. John Kocsis, thanks a lot for doing this tonight, my friend. You were terrific. I really appreciate you doing this. Everybody's going to now go to Twitter. They're going to follow this man on social media so they know when this book is coming out, and everybody's going to buy 2, 3, 4, 5 copies of it, give it to friends, family, and well-wishers as well. Isn't that right, John?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me, Bruce. And guys, thanks for the warm welcome. It's really been a treat to talk to you guys.
I appreciate you doing this. Thank you very much. We're going to see everybody next week. Thanks for coming out. Have a great night, everybody. See you again soon.
Yeah.